How many times do you revisit old projects? Those quilts that you may have made a year ago, 5 years, 10, 20? Do you have any of those long-term projects hanging around? Today I want to tell you the stitch story of my Women of the Bible quilt. This quilt actually celebrated its 10th birthday this year, and I was reminded of the whole process when I got an email from Google with some blog statistics, because I created a special blog to document making this fabulous quilt. So the Women of the Bible quilt was an online adventure, like I said, 10, 11 years ago, to around 2013, 2014 time frame. And there were a lot of quilt-alongs going on with these as kind of a block of the month, block of the week program, because there was a book published, a companion Bible study, and people were following the weekly study and making one block to represent those different stories from the Bible. And I contacted a friend of mine who also liked to sew, and she had a group of women in Hungary. Yes, the country of Hungary in Europe. And I lived here in Arizona, so we were doing this long distance, which is why I started a blog to share the quilting patterns. My friend was able to get a copy of the Bible study, and so she worked through the study questions and did the sewing with her local friends, and we shared our progress online. It was a great way to stay connected with friends around the world. The power of the internet is so amazing that still to this day I get comments on that old blog that documents each of these quilt blocks. I don't share the full tutorials because they were published by another quilter who I've lost touch with. I don't know whatever happened to the full pattern for these blocks, but you know, it was a wonderful project, and it brings back a lot of happy memories. So let me give you a quick overview of each of the blocks and some of the challenges I had along the way. The project started with the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis. This has got to start at the beginning. I chose colors to represent the stories as best I could. So the Garden of Eden has wonderful greens and yellows, and then of course the red in the center. And then each of these rows represents the different stories for each week. 52 blocks doesn't work out to a square quilt. So what I did was I did my 8 rows of 6, and then I put the 4 extra in the corners. So you see I have my Eve block in one corner, and then we have the Star of Bethlehem block, which has been republished more recently as the Swoon block. And that represents Mary. In this corner, we have Esther, that wonderful story of speaking up to make the change that you want to see in the world. And then finally, I used the woman with a sinful life, because that speaks to all of us in this earthly realm. I had a challenge right off the bat with this block because the original design was applique, and I am not a very accomplished person when it comes to applique. It's one of those quilt techniques I tend to avoid, so I had to redraft that block and just use traditional piecing and some paper piecing for some of these blocks where I didn't want to attempt the applique. And that was my first foray into pattern writing, was taking these instructions and the overall pattern and giving some tips and tricks as I went along. So we had a lot of piecing, and these are 6-inch blocks. So they got, you know, these blocks that had a lot of pieces. They got kind of small. And within a few weeks, I got adventurous with some of the applique. And on these blocks, I just did some raw edge applique, which was not too bad as we went along. And you can see all of the different blocks. I do remember drafting this block as an alternate because I wasn't fond of the original design. And here you can see another block with lots of tiny pieces. I remember being very challenged with this block. You can see I lost a lot of my points, but again, we're making really small half square triangles there. So, you know, stand back 30 feet, give yourself a break. And then by the very end, I did get brave with my applique, and again, just did some raw edge applique for those circle blocks. And you can see it's starting to fray a bit on that block with the tiny, tiny squares in the corner. But that is my Women of the Bible. And I did a totally scrappy layout, just pulling fabrics from my stash. And then I went and found a wonderful multicolor batik here for the sashing and the border. And for the quilting, I just went around the primary elements of each block to give it some stability. And then I put some freehand feathers in the sashing. And I am quite pleased with this quilt. And I had originally planned on displaying it at my local church with a nice write-up about all the blocks. But as you can see, it still lives at my house, and I think I will keep this on display for a while and enjoy it. Another fun detail, since I planned on displaying this quilt, I attached these hanging loops right when I did the binding. So I made sure that those were matching fabric, and I just made 4 of them along the quilt and intend for a dowel to go through, and this quilt is ready for display. So here is the website that I got a notification about. There is still traffic. A few people every month are still finding this WordPress blog where I documented the Women of the Bible quilt, and it goes in reverse order. So this free motion quilting post describes my final steps of the project, but you can see each of the blocks had a blog entry, and the about page talks about me and my friend and gives you a resource for the patterns. Carol Hondrich was the quilter, and this Patterns of Faith website is the one that I have not been able to find an updated link to. It hasn't been updated in years. Each one shows the different fabrics and some of my process putting it together. Once you get down to the bottom, you can go forwards or backwards. You'll want to choose the earlier pieces, and then there's the related post section of the website just kind of bounces around, so you can see the different blocks that were included. And this was just a really fun, scrappy project, and I should probably investigate those sites that let you create a book out of your blog, and then I would at least have all of this documentation in a hard copy form and I could refer back to it. So that's the process I used way back when I was piecing the Women of the Bible quilt. If you're wondering about some of my other epic projects, check out this video and let me know what you're working on in the comments below.